Good morning. I hope you're all having a pleasant morning. I'm going to start with a fact I learned this morning. So this morning, my colleague Andrew, who many of you will know, taught me the history of the word quarantine, which I thought was quite appropriate considering the circumstances. First time I've ever done a webinar from home, and I think the same is true for Kevin as well. Back in the plague days in Italy, the ships coming into the port of Venice were being asked to quarantine for 40 days. My Italian is not fantastic, but the term for 40 in Italian is quantara, and that's the origin of the word quarantine. So that was a nice little nugget to learn to take from today. So if you learn nothing else, you might have learned where the history of the word quarantine comes from. Many of you see some familiar names. Many of you will know me. I am Dave Adamson. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CTO at eacs, so I look after our technical portfolio and also our project and design teams. So lots of you will have worked with people from those two functions coming in delivering projects or designing solutions for you. I've been at eacs for about 5 years. I've got quite a broad background across all things in IT, and most of my time these days is doing things like this, getting out and about, talking to customers, and also working on the development of our technical strategy and taking the feedback from our customers about what types of services they'd like to see from us, which really is partly where this capability that we're talking about today came from. Kevin, if you wanted to introduce yourself. Sorry, Kevin, just bear with me. I have muted you in error. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So Kevin Timms, I'm presently the CEO of eacs and have been so for 3 years. But prior to that, I spent 30 years in manufacturing at Ford Motor Company, but did a tour of the world and responsible for various functions of the organisation: Volvo, Jag Land Rover, Ford US, and even the Formula One team when Jaguar had one of those. And as part of that, clearly picked up a lot of experience of managing large organisations across boundaries like the Atlantic Ocean and so forth. So a lot of experience of managing wide and broad organisations, and that came to the fore as you'll see in the coming slides.
Thanks, Kevin. So Kevin's going to take you through the first part of the presentation, and then I'm going to be his technical sidekick for the second bit, and then we'll wrap up. So Kevin, take it away.
Okay, so we'll cover sort of why does a business need dials, and you may sort of be wondering why have we chosen the subject, and I'll explain in a little while. And then Dave will go through some examples of creating them, what Power BI is all about, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Dave. Now, I've not been in the submarine, but I've seen pictures of them and so forth. And through my experience and running departments and businesses, without having access to that information, it feels to me that it must be like driving a submarine without any dials. You don't know where you're going, you don't know where you've been, you don't know what your heading and so forth is. And without all of that information being up to date and accurate and so forth, you're eventually going to run into some disaster. So you have no choice but to build some information around you that enables you to be able to steer the ship or steer your organization. It may not be a whole company, but it may be a department within a company. So we go to the next slide, please, Dave. So what we did 3 years ago when we came into eacs was start to build a governance process where once a week we looked at the dials and the key dials of the business. We check them every day, but once a week for an hour, we get together with the executive team and go through all of those dials and understand the direction of the business. And we look at the sort of critical indicators of each area and how that data changes over time, the trends, so that we can sort of plot what changes we need to do. However, 3 years ago when we came in, our ability to do that was really, really limited. Our tools were really quite poor. Our systems of record existed, so the data was there, but extracting it out in a consistent way where we could look at it as like a dashboard just didn't exist. And whenever we asked, or I asked the question, what if we did this, it would take an awful long time for people with pivot tables and so forth to be able to come back with the answer. It clearly wasn't the way we needed to work. So what we needed to do was provide something that was flexible, that sat on top of our systems of record, that enabled us to be able to see what those dials were. So go to the next slide, please, Dave. Here are some examples of the things that we measure. So from a sales standpoint, orders processed, orders forecast, what we've got coming in, what's been deferred or delayed. Obviously the service desk, so the key operations of our business, what's the ticket volumes, what's been open, what's been closed, service levels, P1s and so forth. Project and consulting reports, so where are they, the amount of resources we're using, what's the data coming in and so forth. So really pretty much in that 1 hour, we look at everything across the business. We don't try and fix anything. It's all about looking at the data, and then we'll use other forums to do it. So we need a set of those dashboards, and we go through probably about 80 or so different charts and slides that we use to look at our business. And what we've done over the last 3 years is built all of that on top of our systems of record. So things like Clarizen for our project management, Dynamics 365 for our CRM, Autotask, and a whole load of others that we built to do that. And it's taken a while, but having got there, we've really got a great view of the business. So all of that, fantastic news, all sailing along pretty happy. No major issues. We've plotted the course we wanted to grow. We've grown the business 60% in 3 years. Everything's all fine and good. And then, unfortunately, go to the next slide. Then COVID-19 happens, and all of a sudden, our world is turned, and I'm sure yours is as well, upside down. And we really need to start to determine what we do. We've got some really dangerous waters. Things are very difficult to navigate. And if we go to the next slide, sort of dive or surface, you've got to make some decisions about what you do. Do you furlough people? Do you not? How many? What other things are changing in the organization and around you? So we suddenly had to change what we were looking at. So an example, how busy was purchasing rather than just the turnaround time. So we were looking at the service levels of purchasing, how quickly would they turn around an order coming in from a client. But all of a sudden we had to look at, well, how busy are purchasing? What's the volume of orders? What's the trend being? So therefore, what can we do around, for example, things like furlough, and who's been isolating, who can't work, and so on. So what the tool enabled us to do was rapidly change the sort of views that we were looking at, so that we could focus on the things that were really important, and focus on the way that we would manage our business through this. And so about a month ago, a lot of the charts and the dials that we were looking at in that forum changed quite radically. Obviously some didn't, a lot did, but we didn't have to go back and completely change them and rewrite them, because we'd already done the work and taken the time to sort of build them. We were able to make a few rapid changes. Some of them I even made myself. The management reports have sliders and dials and picks and so on them, so you can choose what you're looking at. So we were able to really rapidly pivot what we were looking at in that meeting and change how we operated the business. So whilst it is extremely challenging for us, and we're working our way through all of that, and like you, we had to figure out how to work from home, manage a service desk, and so forth. But this has been a really significant add to our portfolio, being able to manage the business. So what I think we'll do now is hand over back to Dave, who's going to take you through some examples, a little bit more detail of Power BI, just to give you a sneak preview of under the covers. We don't have a huge amount of time, but hopefully it will give you an idea of the kinds of things that we've done and built. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Kevin. So the first rule of demos is to get your excuses in early. So my two are, number one, I am not a data scientist. I am a semi-skilled idiot when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I have a basic capability, which I'll take you through. I'll show you a bit of the art of the possible, but the beautiful stuff and the analytics, which is the important stuff that comes with the report data, is something we have specialists for. So don't take my noddy efforts as being the art of the possible. The second one is, those of you used to dealing with cloud technologies will be familiar with the automatic updates that you have no control over. So as is always the way, the day before a demo, imagine my horror logging in this morning to see Power BI desktop has been updated. So I don't know quite what that means, and we'll find out together. One of the key things about Power BI is it's really, really capable at aggregating data together from different data sources, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a moment. But it's part of what we call the Common Data Service. So this is Microsoft rewriting their platform. So the days of Windows Server and the associated technologies that you're familiar with, SQL Server, all being isolated, disparate entities that you needed to bring together to do reporting through the use of things like SQL Server reporting services and analysis services or third-party tools like ClickView or Tableau. Those days are rapidly entering into the rearview mirror with the investments that Microsoft have made in the Common Data Service. The Common Data Service underpins everything really about the Microsoft Cloud, so particularly what we're talking about today around Power BI and some of the other associated tech, but also the Graph API, which is the thing that makes all of the magic happen when it comes to using Azure Active Directory, Office 365, some of the Azure tooling that you might already be using. So whilst Power BI is really capable of bringing data from different data sources together, it's also baked in natively to many of the tools that will be familiar to you, and certainly the tools that we use to run our business. So for us, when looking for a reporting tool, it was a very easy decision to make to get into using Power BI. I'll talk to you a little bit later on about some of the other stuff that's associated with that. If you bear with me one moment, I will just flip screens. And hopefully that's, I'll just check the audience speeds and make sure you can see that. Cool. So this is the Power BI desktop application. So this is not an application that many of the people on the call will be making use of. So this is where you design and author reports. It's where you manipulate and analyze data. So this is the area where your data scientists, where your reporting specialists will live and breathe. And we'll show you in a minute what it looks like to consume some of these things. I talked a little bit about the capabilities of Power BI to bring in data from different sources. Pretty much anything with some sort of API or programmable interface, you can get data out of in some format. Now, whether that's a manual export through to a CSV file or a slightly more dynamic web call, there's a whole bunch of pre-built connectors been categorized for you here, but you can see this is quite an exhaustive list of many of the applications that will be key to you in running your businesses today. So maybe you're a Salesforce house, maybe you use Google Analytics for doing your SEO on your websites. You might use Marketo to do some of your campaign management when you're pushing your products and services out to your customer base. There's an awful lot of ready-made connectors in here that you can see that cover most of what businesses are using today. If they don't, as long as there's an API and you can make some sort of web call against it, then we can write something to get the data out for you. Kevin mentioned Clarizen earlier on, which is what we use to run our project management processes. Clarizen doesn't have a Power BI connector, but it has a well-documented API. So our developers are able to just write queries that pull the data out of Clarizen, which has some native reporting capabilities, but doesn't allow us to do the data manipulation in the way that we need to. So expressing things as percentages natively, for example, which you can't do in the Clarizen reporting tool. For the purposes of what we're going to do here, I'm going to keep it really simple and just grab some data from Excel. Most of you will have spreadsheets with data in that matters to your business in some way, shape or form. And this spreadsheet's just got some dummy data in, some dummy financial data. There's actually a Microsoft sample that they make available to you on the website just to have a bit of a play around with. And you can see when it loads, it's picking up that there are 2 worksheets in here. Actually, there's only one, but one of them has a table in Excel, so it's able to recognize the difference between a worksheet and a properly formatted table with header rows. If I select my table, you can see that I've got some information in here as a preview, and I can either load the data straight into the report, or I can head over into the transform data window, which is where you might want to manipulate the data before you load it into the report. We'll just load up, and I just need to change screen. So this is the Power BI query editor, which is what loads when you click transform data. So this is where our reporting specialists live, and perhaps yours might do as well. You can see the table data they've got here, which has got some market segments, some countries, some products, and then some financial data around number of units, sell price, those kind of things that you might be interested in, and some date information. So when it's loaded the spreadsheet in, it's automatically tried to identify the type of the data. So you can see the ABC symbol here, which means it's a text field. We've got a units sold, which is a number, and then also a slightly different representation for currency, so a different numerical figure there, which we'll come back to in a moment. And then as we go through into things like months, it's able to understand the date and some indexing capability that's been put in to make sure the months sort in the right order. So I'm not going to change this data, but I could change the way that it's presented here. So I'm just going to hit close and apply and flip back to my other window. And if you keep your eye on the right hand side under the fields section, I've got some pre-built stuff here. You'll see I've now got my financials data, and it's brought in the different tables and columns, sorry, the different columns with their various titles. And you can see here the formatting that it's picked up. So it knows this is a date, it knows these are numbers and represents them accordingly. Maybe for my sale price, I want to define that information. So I'm going to click on top of it. You can see if I go into the column tools section, I'm able to tell Power BI that that is a piece of currency rather than just a generic number. I can choose English UK. What I tend to do when I pull spreadsheet type data in, which I do from time to time, exports from different systems that we maybe haven't yet connected to Power BI, is sometimes I'm not quite sure what I'm working with. So I'll just pick a few fields that I think are maybe what I need. These are all quite helpfully named. It's not uncommon to see column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. It can be quite a laborious process to go through and rename those to make sense to you when you're building your reports, but it's worth investing that time up front. So if I take up my sale price, my country, and then maybe we'll have number of units sold and the date. These here are visualizations. So these are different ways of expressing that data. And I'm going to put them into a table to help me understand what data I've got. You can see here I've got different rows, columns, values. So anybody used to working with a pivot table in Excel, there's some similarities to be had here. And I can choose to filter or take out different things that I'm interested in. And then I can format the look and feel of my table here with different values, just like you would do in Excel. Over on the left here, we've got the filters. So I can set up report filters, which control what data is made available, or I can do that and make that available to end consumers of the report when I'm happy with it, because they might want to slice and dice the data. If I'm reporting my project figures into Kevin, for example, I'll put a slider or a filter on the report that he views so that he can choose to look at last month, next month, this month, maybe by technology or by department or something like that. So I've got a little table up here where you can see the country, sale price, and the units sold. Maybe I want to express that in a slightly more visual fashion. So if I flip that over to being a bar chart, we can see I can now express the sale price and the units sold. And there's all sorts of different ways I can view and expose that data. I can put multiple visuals onto this one report. You can see I've got multiple pages down the bottom, so I can create paginated reports, maybe with a summary report at the beginning, and then different areas that perhaps cover different departments of your business, which is actually what we do for our board pack. So when we do our board reports, a lot of that data is expressed in this fashion, and we simply have a section for each area in the business. Power BI has a number of native visuals that are built in, but the pretty stuff is in the custom visuals. So there's something called App Source, which is like a marketplace of visuals that people have built into the community. You can either build your own or you can consume some of the ones that have been added here. They cover all sorts of things, so everything from helping you tell a story through data, through use of infographics, or doing quite complex forecasting and analysis with statistical models, allowing you to interact in programming languages like R, which are used heavily in data science, and tracking KPIs and different facts and figures that might be of interest to you in your organization. Everybody's favorite visual is this guy. So I'm going to add that to my report, and you can see that that custom visual has been imported. If I click on that visual icon, it creates me one, and I'm now tracking sales figures by country by size of fish. Who doesn't want that on a wallboard in their office? I'm not telling you whether we have something similar for our sales team, but you can make your own guess. So once we've done our report and we're happy with it, we then go ahead and publish it, and that's how people consume the reporting data. So thankfully, working for a CIO, I have a relatively technically competent boss, although that was maybe not an accusation that we'd level across our entire executive, despite being an IT business. So making it easy to consume is important to us. If I go ahead and click the publish buttons, it prompts me to save the changes, and then asks me where I want to publish it. I am logged in as the wrong person, so for reasons of data privacy, just bear with me a moment. So I'm logged in as a dummy user who has what's called a workspace. So a workspace is where a collection of information comes together. Now in Power BI terms, that could just be a workspace devoted to Power BI. But actually how we consume Power BI in our business is through the use of teams a lot. So each team that I'm a member of appears it has a Power BI workspace associated with it, or Office 365 group if you work with those. Each of those can have Power BI reports published into them and consumed through that application, or consumed through that application and through the web interface or other means as well. So in this case, I'm just going to publish that to my workspace. And here we go. So you can see that you can create a customized view of the report suitable for mobile phones. So a lot of us are doing work on mobiles or tablets or looking at data on the go because we're not sitting in front of our screens, maybe more so now than we have done historically. But I've now published my dashboard. So I'm going to flip over to the web view, which will inevitably have timed out. So my apologies if I have to go through a login loop again. Here we are. So this is my my web view of my Power BI, and you can see that people can share different reports and data with me. In this case, because this is a dummy user, there's no information shared, but I do have my personal workspace where I've just published that report to. If I head into my workspace, you can now see it's done two things. It's created a data set, which is the data that comes in. I'll explain the title in a moment. And then a report, which is what we view and we consume. So a data set is where we control how the report behaves. So maybe the cadence of how often it refreshes. If you're connecting on-premises data rather than cloud-based data through to Power BI, we need a gateway, so we configure things like that through the data set. We don't have any dashboards published at the moment, so a dashboard is a collection of information as live tiles from reports. But for the purposes of this, we'll just have a look at the report that's been published. So you can see I can share that report with other people if I've got the right permissions. It's important to point out all of this data can be protected with the native tooling within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. I managed to correct myself there and not call it Office 365, which is going to trip me up for the next few months. And you can see some information here. I can pull the data down to Excel if I want to do some detailed analysis personally, or I can disable that functionality if you've got sensitive information. You maybe don't want that being exportable by the consumers. Quick Insights gives me some natural language intelligence that the system has tried to assume of my data. So maybe it's going to tell me, did you know you sell 38% more units in Canada than you do in Mexico? And maybe just start to prompt some questions. I think the big thing that came out of our transition to visualizing and aggregating all of our data together was it prompted us to ask management questions that we'd never thought of asking before. And that's been really instrumental in the way that we've taken our services forwards over the last few years. If I get into the report itself, you can see I've got a data updated point at the top here. So we can either update that data on demand, or we can trigger a scheduled refresh. So we might want that data reporting, I don't know, once a day, once a month, once a week, whatever it might be. Because this is the first time this user's logged in, it's giving me a little guided tour to the interface. It's telling me where I can find things, which is very helpful. And you'll see with one of the reports, I've published some filters that can be consumed by the end user. So in this situation, I've got a filter set up which allows me to filter by company. In this situation, I filtered it by Silverstone. So what this data set is a map that comes out of our CRM system. So last year when we held the Optimize IT event, which hopefully many of you attended at Silverstone for the first time, in our CRM system, we obviously record which people have registered for that event and the company and contact information associated with that. So we've got your company address on our records, we've got you on our records, we associate the two together, and your registration, maybe from different tables and different data sets, but we bring it all together to provide an aggregated view. We moved Optimize last year for a number of reasons, one of which was just to freshen things up a bit, help bring our messages out to a slightly different geography, perhaps make it a bit more accessible for some people in the Midlands and the West. So we wanted to see what impact that had on our registration data. So I haven't got the full set here, but what we did was we saw that the heat map of the registrations from 2018, when we held the event in Duxford outside Cambridge, was markedly different to the heat map for the registrations in 2019. So we could see very visually that we'd achieved our business goal, which was, can we get a different set of attendees to come to this event and help promote our services and hopefully help us do more business and work with more customers. Now, for reasons of data sensitivity, I'm just going to pause my screen share a moment. And I've now just removed that filter. So you can start to see that we're able to plot that data and get a bit of a view. So when we looked back at the previous year and compared them side by side, we could see a more southeast concentration of data, whereas this time around we had much more data in the Midlands and West area. So that was really insightful for us and a really easy way to consume and ratify a business decision that we've made. And really that's the power of BI, bringing data to life, prompting you to ask questions that you might not have thought to ask previously. We are heading towards the end of the brief window that we've got set up. So I'm just going to flick back to our presentation. So it talks a little bit about the ecosystem around Power BI. So we chose Power BI because we're a Microsoft house, because the skills we had in the business, which really we bought for our internal purposes, we built a development and business apps team to help us go on that modernization journey that Kevin talked about at the beginning. But also because we're integrated into so much else in the Microsoft stack. So Teams is how we run our business day to day. You know, it's how we promote cross-departmental collaboration. Obviously, with the current situation, there's been an awful lot of uptake of services like Teams to help people work collaboratively when they're dispersed. But we also start to bring things in automation in our business. So anybody who I'm connected with on LinkedIn, you might have seen me pop a post up a little while back about how I'd used Power Automate to develop a simple automation workflow for requesting my design team. So when your client manager has a chat with you and you say, maybe, can you help me with this cloud migration project? They wheel in one of our solution architects, and I built a little workflow to help me manage that process, manage the team's workload and report on it in Power BI. Really in quite a straightforward fashion as a non-developer. And then as we get into the more complex automation that we wanted to do in our business, that platform is the foundation for where our proper developers, rather than our hobbyist semi-intelligent ones like me, can do some really magical stuff and integrate it into Power Apps, into Power Automate, into SharePoint, which I know we've done some work with on some of the people on the call, and around that whole broader Microsoft 365 ecosystem and the Azure platform that underpins it, whether that's using Azure data warehouse services for some of the data that we're reporting on for people. We've done some really interesting and innovative reporting projects with some of our customers, which I can't really go into depth about on the call, but one example that springs to mind is working on the supply chain visualization for a coffee distributor in the UK. So looking at where their different coffee growers were coming and what sort of market appetite there was for the different types of blends they had, and it really did prompt them to ask those questions that they didn't know they wanted to know the answer to. With that, I think we're just about heading towards the end of time. I mean, if what you've seen here today is of some interest to you, we can obviously dive into a bit more depth with you one-to-one. Please reach out to your EACS client manager if you do have one. If not, please feel free to drop us a link. There's information on the contact details below. You can find me on LinkedIn, or my email is dave.adamson@eacs.com. By all means, just drop me a line. I'd be happy to help plug you into the right people. We've got a couple of minutes, so if anybody did have any immediate questions, I can see we haven't had any submitted through the Q&A. And I'm not into the fake staged questions, because you can spot them a mile off. So I'm going to unmute the microphones in a moment. If you could let us know if you do have any questions, we'll pause for a moment. And if not, we'll wrap up. So bear with me one moment. There we go. So you can now mute yourselves if you wish, but you can also speak out. So if there were any questions, please fire away. Okay, no surprises. It's the same every time. Although we have some very nice feedback from one of the participants saying that's been a helpful overview. So I hope that sentiment is shared. That's about it from me. Kevin, I'll just offer you an opportunity to say a few words, but thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to speaking to you all soon, hopefully coming to see some of you when we're allowed out again.
Thanks very much, Dave. I think that was incredibly insightful, and a quick look under the covers of what we built internally as to and how it helps us. So thank you all for joining.
All right, thanks very much, everyone. We'll share a link out to the recording and the slides, and we'll hope to speak to you all soon. Have a great day.